Okay, continuing on with effects, let's look at some examples now from simulation, transition, and distortion. All right, so I have my still my typical NTSC D1 widescreen square pixel composition that's 5 seconds long, and I stuck in a couple of pictures. Okay, doesn't matter what they are; they're just examples. All right, so with the top picture selected, I'm going to go to Effect, and let's try Simulation, and then Shatter first. Okay. Now this thing auto animates, okay, from the beginning of that layer, right? And it just shows you these wireframes. But if we go up into the effect area and change it from wireframe and forces to rendered, okay, then we can see what's happening here. It's blowing up into these bricks. And there's all kinds of controls here to help you change the shape of the bricks, what kind of light, how they fly out, if there's wind or gravity, if they spin or not, all kinds of stuff. So, and also this is a 3D effect, okay? After Effects has a limited amount of 3D in it. So if I go to camera position and X, Y, and Z, so Y is the, X is back and forth, right? Y is up and down and Z is back into space. So if I change the Y rotation a little bit, I can look at it from the side. Okay, I'm going to rotate that back more or less. All right, so just to look at a few examples here of things you can do. If I go to shape, see it's bricks right there. And if I want it to be puzzle, okay. And there's all kinds of stuff. If I change, let's see, repetitions, if I increase the number of repetitions, that'll make the size smaller. There might be other ways to do that, but I know that one does. I can make the extrusion deeper to make fat pieces of the puzzle if I want. If I go to force 1, I can, let's see, what do we got here? That's just showing the size of the force, which I don't think I want to change, but physics is what I was thinking of. So if I turn up the rotation speed a bunch, I can get it so it, spins a lot as they come out. So you can have a lot of fun with that. That's Shatter, okay? Now the next one is foam. So for this, I think that the foam it's kind of like a particle generator, although a little different. I'm going to put a solid layer on top of it. So layer, new, solid, and just whatever, make comp size. It probably already is. All right. And I'm going to put the foam, let the foam replace this layer. So effect, simulation, foam. Okay, and this auto animates also. And so it makes these, round bubbles or whatever particles that are kind of interesting the way they're generated, because they sort of affect each other. You'll notice that to some degree they sort of bounce off each other, and it gives it this kind of unique foamy character. It's different from a particle system that's more like a, like a sparkler or something where they just come straight out without being affected by each other. All right, so let's just have a look at this thing. For view, let's change that like we did the last one to rendered. And you can see these nice little bubbles on there. And if we go down to bubble, I'm just kind of showing you examples of things you can do here. All these settings can be played around with. And of course, you can look anything up online. I can make the bubbles bigger or smaller. I can change their lifespan, how long it takes before they pop. Physics, if I want to put some wind on it, I can make them blow off to, like to one side like that. I'll put that back to 0. doesn't seem to have gravity, I guess. So I guess you would make the change the wind direction to pointing down if you wanted it to look like gravity. Um, but under rendering is kind of interesting. So first of all, for bubble texture, I can change that to something else, like, I don't know, red tide. These things never really look like what the descriptions are supposed to be. There's algae. Okay, it is green. Grape soda. Okay. All right, so, but there's more cool stuff you can do right here that might not be very obvious. You can put an environment map. So map means a picture, right? A bitmap. An environment map on there, which will give it a reflective surface. And then you can put a texture on it, right? Or some kind of image, like as though it's like painted on the surface as opposed to being reflected on the surface. So if I go to environment map and change it to Fantasticus, that's the frog there, should be able to get it showing, but oh, I think I need to turn up reflection strength. There it is. So there's the frog reflected on the surface of the bubbles. It's pretty cool. And you can also up under physics, the viscosity and stickiness are kind of interesting to play with because they affect, you can make it look like one big blob of syrup flowing out or different things like that. But there's another thing that's cool on here. I can change the shape of the bubbles. By default, they're all just round, right? But let's see, if I go and I want to draw a star on here, right? So first of all, make sure there's no layer active, because if I have an active layer, it's going to make it a mask, right? So I'm inside the rectangle, go to the star tool, and I'm just going to draw a big star like that. Okay, and it's actually going to, it uses the entire composition size to map this thing on. So I'm going to stretch it horizontally somewhat, and it'll make it look better. So I don't need to see the shape layer now, so I'm going to just turn off the eyeball on that, and back to my black solid layer that has the effect on it, right? And let's see, what do we have here? So the bubble texture, I got to change that from grape soda to user defined. All right, so now I see no texture, but it just still has a reflection on there. And I think I'm going to turn the reflection off here. But so the bubble texture layer, I'm going to go to shape layer 1. That's my star. And there it worked. Okay. And I can also, I can put the environment back on there. I think that'll still work. Yeah. So there it is. If I wanted a star with a frog reflection on it, doesn't exactly make sense, but all right. So anyway, that's foam. Let's look at some transitions. So I'm going to get rid of that foam. And in fact, I'm going to delete my entire shape layer 1 and black solid 1. Okay, so I'm back to just the 2 pictures. All right, with the top one selected, let's look at a couple of transitions. All right, this is ways to transition from one image to the other, right? Like if you're doing a slideshow or something like that. If you wanted something fancy, effect, transition, and let's try gradient wipe. Okay, so this is kind of weird the way this one works. It's the name is kind of like a poor description for this. I think to me a gradient wipe seems like it should, you know, fade across from one to the other with a gradient kind of. But the gradient refers to the gradient in the overall image. So if you look at the transition completion, see it starts from the dark areas. That's just an interesting effect for changing from one thing to another that might be useful. And let's see if I make it softer. Okay, transitions without such hard edges on it, I guess. And you can if you play around with these, I think you can get it to reverse and go in the opposite direction too. So anyway, that's gradient wipe. All right, I deleted that. Let's go to look at, I think card wipe is a fun one to play with. All right, so that does this, right? If I just change the transition completion here, it flips it over, okay? The default way it's set up is it goes back to the same one that it was at before. So probably, let's see, we want to change back layer. Fantasticus is the frog, right? And if I change it to my other one that's just a picture of something, oops, then when it's still kind of weird because when it flips over, it shows the other one. But you can play around with that at any rate. And this also, like the shatter one we looked at, is kind of 3D, and you can change the camera position. Look at it from the side. And there's all kinds of controls. You can set up lighting and make the material more or less shiny, give it thickness to the bricks, and change it in all different ways. Change the number of rows and columns. Yeah, and it's just pretty fun to play with. And to animate it doesn't auto animate it. See, when I drag this, it doesn't do anything. You have to keyframe here, right? Start at 0, for example, turn on keyframing, go to another point in time, change the value, and then it's animated. Okay, looks a little weird because I rotated it on the y-axis, but all right. I'm going to delete the effect, keep the 2 layers, and let's look at a few and distort. All right, one that I find useful here is effect, distort, bulge is pretty cool. Okay, so it's sort of like just makes a circle that you can drag around, and it makes it look like a magnifying glass kind of. So if you actually had a magnifying glass, for example, and put this inside it and move the whole thing around, it could be pretty interesting. And you can make it more extreme by turning up the bulge height. And stuff like that. So that's fun. Bulge. Let's try ripple. Effect, distortion, distort. Okay, so that kind of ripples out from the center like a pond. And if I turn up the wave height, let's see what happens. Okay, so we'll do this, and I can move the center of the ripple around. There we go. All right, really nice effect. And again, when you have like a layer like this, oh look, we're actually on the layer. But when you're on a solid layer, generally make sure that you're trying to move a point around like this, make sure that you don't accidentally move the whole solid layer. You want to make sure you're actually moving the center point. Okay, that's a common mistake to make. All right, and let's look at one more here. Effect. What am I doing? Distort. Liquefy is fun. These are all kind of things that are in Photoshop, but there's a bunch of. So if you've used Photoshop, you know this thing. So there's a bunch of different ways, kind of brushes with different physics, sort of. But the default one lets me just kind of smear stuff like this. So it's kind of like a sort of like a retouching tool. And it actually is somewhat animatable what we're doing here, but it's a little bit tough. Like, I mean, it's very easy to work on a still image like this, but if you're trying to use liquify on a moving object, piece of footage, right? Like you might do something to somebody's face, and then if they just move, they move off of the liquify. So that's something that you may have to do motion tracking to the effect to get that to work, but that's a whole other can of worms. But I think this is a good brief look at some effects at the moment.